got Jairus, and he's anxiously waiting. Anxiously waiting. This crowd has been moving towards his house, moving slowly through the streets, compact, and now there's this discussion. We don't know how long, maybe 10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. The pause has been there looking for this woman in the exchange, and Jesus is interacting with her. If you're Jairus and your daughter is dying and help is on the way and suddenly there's a pause, it must feel like being in an ambulance rushing off to the hospital only to hit a traffic jam. And all over our major cities in the world where there's millions and millions, this happens. People die in the ambulance on the way to the hospitals because they get stuck in traffic. Time was of the essence. And the crowd has made everything slow. The interruption has made it slower. You can imagine he's on edge. Yes, there's hope. Okay, Jesus, you healed her. Great. That means I probably got the right guy. But then something happens. Verse 35. While Jesus was still speaking, most likely to the woman, some people came from the house of Jairus, the synagogue leader. Your daughter is dead, they said. Why bother the teacher anymore? It was news, bad news of hopelessness, finality, powerlessness. There's nothing anyone can do now. Jesus didn't make it in time, and Jairus' heart would have sunk with the news. Except number 3, Jesus changes the news of death for the children of God. Jesus changes the news of death for sons and daughters of the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Jesus is still speaking with the woman. There's commotion in the crowd, and the people approach Jairus, and they begin to speak with Jairus, who had for the moment been sidelined and felt the delay and felt the timing was off. Mark 5, verse 36. It says ignoring what they had said, and some translations use overhearing what they had said, but there's plenty of evidence that probably the best way to translate the word is ignoring what they had said. Jesus tells Jairus, don't be afraid, just faith. Just faith, just believe, just have faith in me, just trust in me. Again, let's think about what we've been learning so far about Jesus' power. We have seen Jesus ignoring dire situations before. We saw him sleeping on a cushion in a boat in a storm. We saw him unfazed by a legion of demons. And here, Jesus ignores the news of death, and he challenges Jairus to continue to have faith. Faith is rising to the surface in this story, and will carry over into next week's story as well. Mark wants us to remember, yes, all of the power and all of the authority is in Jesus, but there's still a requirement of trust, belief, and faith from us. And this will set us up for the weeks to come. Mark is requiring more than awe of Jesus. We must trust him, even to the point of ignoring our fear of death. The moment was tense enough that Jesus begins to strategically change the situation. And he says, let's get away from the crowds. Verse 37, he did not let anyone follow him. Why? Because there's a battle between doubt and faith happening in the things that are to come. He did not let anyone in the crowds follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. Verse 38, when they came to the home of the synagogue leader, Jesus saw the commotion. The people are crying and they're wailing loudly. The girl is dead. He went in and he said to him, and perhaps he says this because in Jewish tradition, the funerals would start and the mourning rituals would start and people would come from the community. And when there was a death, they knew death. They knew death. And here people are bringing not a word of life, but they're bringing the word of grief and death and hopelessness. And so there's a rebuke in his words. Why all this commotion and wailing? And there's a correction. The child is not dead, but asleep. But they laughed at him. And so it says next, after this exchange, he put them all out. He put them all out. Mark's emphasis on the start of the mourning traditions, the commotion, the wailing and crying, is to let us, the reader and the listeners, know the girl is really, really dead. Jesus is not mistaken. He uses a metaphor, which was common in that day, it's common today, to say asleep, perhaps to soften the blow. But in saying the child was not dead but asleep, listen carefully. He was not saying to them, you have misdiagnosed her, you have confused her physical condition. No, he's not saying that, because she was really dead. He's not saying to them, you've confused her physical condition. He is saying to them, you have confused her final condition. You have confused the end of this story. It's not over yet. How many of you know, as Christians, we hold on to this truth at the very core of our faith, that death does not get the last word, that death is not the final condition. And I don't know about you, but when you're thick in the battle, fear comes. It comes into the heart of each and every one of us, of what's going to happen and how bad is it going to be, and is it going to get worse, and could it lead to just ultimate dire circumstances? How many of you know we need a word of wisdom from the Lord to look beyond that moment? I like this picture, and I want to show you this quick clip of the intensity of the battle and a word of wisdom that helps a little one push through. It's pretty short. Take a look and see if you can hear the echoes of the Christian faith.
I didn't think it would end this way.
End? No, the journey doesn't end here. Death is just another path. One that we all must take. The grey rain curtain of this world rolls back and all turns to silver glass. And then you see it.
What? And Alpha? See what?
White shores. And beyond. A far green country. And a swift sunrise.
That isn't so bad.
No, it isn't.
It's easy when we're in the heat of battle, fear to creep in, for us to lose sight of the bigger picture. But the Christian message tells us that death is not the end. And so it says in verse 40, Jesus took the child's father and mother and the disciples who were with him, and he went in where the child was. He took her by the hand. He didn't need to, but he loves this girl. The healing's not in that moment just yet. And he said to her, Talitha cum. This was the common language of the people, Aramaic. So Mark translated it for us. He says, it means, little girl, I say to you, get up or rise up. And immediately, at his word, at his command, the little girl stood up and began to walk around. And Mark is careful to remind us to connect all that is going on with the woman, with this little girl, that she was 12 years old. And at this they were completely astonished. Verse 43, and Jesus gave strict orders not to let anyone know about this and told them to give her something to eat as a continual confirmation of her restored life. You see, on that day, Jairus learned firsthand the meaning of his own name. The name Jairus means he enlightens or he awakens. And on that day, a daughter who had suffered defilement for 12 years is restored to peace, and a daughter who is 12 years old and had died from disease and died from what was poor timing and had died from what seemed like the end was raised to life and restored to her parents.
Thank you for watching our video. If you liked it, share it with a friend and subscribe to our channel. We go live every Sunday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Thanks again for watching.